Hey guys and girls, welcome to this week's episode of the B.Invested Birchy podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Birch. This is a show unraveling the truth to the facade of the 21st century. We're now exiting the matrix and waking up to motherfucking reality. This is the first time I've done a podcast with a whiteboard, right? So we're going to make this a podcast, but I thought we've got the whiteboard of the new studio. Let's give it a whirl. So today's podcast, I wanted to do one on something a little bit different out there, right? So people talk to me about, how do I get over this objection? How do we get over that objection? I did a video recently where I talked about doing security swaps. I did videos recently about how to pay down your mortgages. This one here is more of a podcast style, but I wanted to have the whiteboard here so I could start drawing, right? What to do to grow to another level, right? So you get stuck sometimes and there's things that you can do. And I've thought about some of my wildest things that I've done to make a deal happen across the line, right? And most people would think that you just buy a property, and when you buy the property, it's like, okay, I'm just going to randomly just doodle here. It's 200K. You either go and spend 200 grand and buy it cash, or you put down 40K deposit, get a 160K loan, and that's the story of it. Rents out, goes, does its thing, right? But no. I've never seen anyone talk about this on the internet, this one that I'm going to share for you. My first one I'm going to talk about is called a convertible lease, right? So convertible lease, there's two different ways to it. There's multiple options. I've done this on commercial properties that I've bought, offices and stuff like that. So let's say that you've got a shop for $1 million. $1 million. Actually, I'll use a real example. Yeah. Let's go $1.8 million. This is a property I was buying. This is not a convertible lease. It's just a lease with a purchase agreement in it. So I bought an office, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago or something. I paid 1.8 for it. And I wanted to secure that. And I didn't have the capital to do the deal all the time for myself. I had too many other things in the run. So I chucked down a $180,000 deposit on that. 180,000, and I had a 3-year settlement. Why would the owner accept the 3-year settlement? Just because it's a commercial property, it allowed me to do that. So chucked 180 grand down. I rented it for a period of 3 years at $75,000. So the way I saw that is if I had to buy it for $1.8 million, put down 20%, 30% deposit. Let's just say I had to borrow the whole amount, $1.8 million at 5% interest rate. It'd be looking at 100 grand a year. You have to go to the bank. You have to put down the capital, all that sort of stuff. I just threw down a 10% deposit on this deal. And then I had a 3-year lay-by on it, right? By the time I settled it, it was worth 2.5. 2.5 mil. I was paying my rent for that period of time, and then at settlement, I had to pay for it, and I settled it. So that was just a basic lease turning into a purchase there, which is pretty cool. So that there is a lease that is also a purchase agreement. So I want to draw our attention to another scenario that I think is probably a bit more cooler, right? So this is called a convertible lease. Let's look at a convertible lease, which is like when you're leasing a car, right? So let's say you go buy a property. I was going to make an example here. $1.2 million purchase. I haven't heard anyone talking about this online. So if you found another video on this on podcasts or whatever, I'd like to hear about it because no one else is talking about this, right? $1.2 million. Now let's assume that this is a business or something that's attached to it. So you could have the business aspect and then you've got the building aspect here. You go to them and you say, look, you can sell this property for 1.2. I'll give you a 1.2. This is how it's going to break down. I'm going to pay you $200,000 now. and then I'm going to pay the other $1 million over 5 years. So that works out at $200,000 a year. Breaking up into annually or by monthly or by quarterly. Let's just say in this example, you're going to pay 50 grand every 3 months off the property. You could technically, so this is a lease, right? Lease. It is a business expense, right? So that lease is started there. These payments go down, and then you have a balloon payment of $1 at the end, right? You've just made this building become a business expense because it is a building which is not calculated as a capital purchase. It's more calculated as an expenditure to a business. So if you're a business owner, you've got a business premises that you're purchasing, you would cash flow your way through by turning the purchase into a convertible lease. In this instance, I haven't calculated any extra money for interest that you might be wanting to pay the owner. You might pay 52 grand a quarter or 55 grand a quarter and pay like an interest component or whatnot. But that's a second way of doing a creative way. So you've got a lease that has a delayed settlement. So you're exchanging a contract. That's by a normal method that I do, which is purchasing the property, delayed settlement of a few years with a lease over it. The owner of the property is comfortable because they're getting cash flow. It's not a vacant commercial property. Commercial properties, in my experience, are not my favorite cup of tea. Residential properties are. Commercial properties, they can sit vacant for 3, 5, 10 years at a row. And that's why I find these desperate sellers to be able to do that with, because they're more palatable to play with some terms, right? But I'm just fortunate enough, the only reason why I want to entertain that is because I'm actually chucking a business in there myself. So if you're not putting a business in there, I wouldn't even worry about this one. So that's the first deal that I wanted to run past you. The second type of way that I get around, purchasing something is a lot of people don't understand what inflation is out there still. So delayed settlement. I don't even think I need to draw this one on here. Delayed settlement. You buy a property. I'm just going to draw it for the fun of it. 500 grand. And this can happen in all different types of purchases. I've done it. The longest I did was 97,000 for 2-bedroom villas in Nowra. I bought 3 of them, and one for me and 2 for clients, one each client. And we ended up getting about 5 or 6 years out of this. Both from the start to the end. This is by chance. But you might say, hey, I'll pay you your 500 grand. I'm going to give you 50K now. If you think about it, it might be a block of land. It could be something that you're just going to come back to later or whatever. I'll give you 50K. I'll release it to you. But I'm not going to settle on it for another 12 to 36 months. And this has risks attached to it, guys. This has risks attached to it, because if you can't settle it in 12 or 36 months, then you lose your deposit and they could sue you if something happens to the property. But generally, if you're thinking, hey, the market's going to take off, then I bought my principal place, my first principal place in residence, 6-month settlement. It just gives you a runway so that you can either restructure your position or find the cash from somewhere else or whatnot. So it's just a way of securing the price today, because in 3 years' time or 2 years' time, that property goes from 500 grand to 800 grand. And then suddenly, if you didn't make that decision today, you wouldn't be able to control that asset, because ultimately you don't own property, right? The Crown owns it, right? We're talking about, feudal peasants, and we're in this system where the Crown or the kingdom owns the land. You never really own it anyway. You want to control the assets. This is another way that you can get more stuff in your orbit much quicker, much better, and capitalize on inflation. So the other one that's similar to that of a delayed settlement could be an option. So where this works is you could find a property which would be, $2 million. And this here, it's very common to do an option on a development site. And I plan on doing this a lot in the future, maybe another 5 years' time. Let's say it's a $2 million property, could be a $5 million property, whatever. You go up to the owner, there's a lack of people coming in to buy that property. There's not many buyers out there. So you go to them and say, hey, I'll give you 2% deposit as an option fee. 2% on, say, 2 million would be 1% would be 20K, so it'll be 40K option fee. That gives you 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever. You set the terms out, right? But if you pull out of the deal, you lose the $40,000. You might put in $100,000 as an option fee, depending on the price, depending on what you feel is a comfortable term for that. If you pull out of an option, well, then they can't sue you. It's just option that expired. You never proceeded with it. Everyone walks off. You lose the money that you put down as a deposit. It's very common when it comes to development sites. I see a case for that. Big fan of it, but it's not something that I form as a part of my foundation portfolio. It's not something I use regularly, but I do use the other ones that I was talking about beforehand. This one here that I want to talk about is vendor finance. This is my fourth favorite one, which you can do in all different ways. You can do it as a structured buyout, or you could do it as an annual term. I'll just run through a couple of examples that I've used. So let's just say a $3.5 million purchase that I did, and let's say a $3.8 million purchase that I did. I remember when the banks would lend to me, right? And one day I was like, if the banks ain't going to fucking lend to me, I'll go and turn people into my banks, right? And that's what I sort of did, right? So there's been times when I've used this, and these are just some real life examples. This one here, I'll draw it out. So $3.5 million. I put down about $1 million, about $500,000 onto it. And then I took possession of the property. So I had a $3 million vendor finance attached to it. And then I paid $50K a month times 12 months. So that equals $600K. So after year 2, it went from 3.5 minus the 500 to $3 million purchase, $3 million at settlement, vendor finance that. After the first year, or actually it was a license. I got in there as operation as a license for 12 months. And then for that $3 million, after 12 months, I got down to 2.4. And then I had as an agreement that after 12 months, I'd pay another $600,000, which brought that down to 1.8 million. And then there was another 3 years at $50K a month, which worked out to be $600,000 a year, which worked out to be a $0 balance there. The only reason why someone accepted that is because they had no other buyers out there in the market for that at the time, and they accepted my terms, right? And that became a way that I could cash flow myself to go through and wipe out that property. I'll use another example here. And these are not things that I'd use. They don't happen on residential. Imagine walking into someone's house and saying, yeah, I know you're living here. It's my dream house. Get out of my house. I'll pay you $50,000 a month or $20,000 a month or whatever, and I'll pay you in the next 5 years. It's not going to happen, right? But you just need to choose your target and find the opportunity that's going to allow this to happen. So this one here, I chucked $200,000 down initially, and then I chucked another $600K on it, which left me with a figure of $3 million. So I paid 3.8, 200,000 down, 600,000 down. Well, I think I paid 3.8, I paid 600,000, took possession. And then in 6 months, I paid a 200,000. So I brought the debt all the way down to $3 million. And then that was a 5-year vendor finance payment. Vendor finance. And I paid them $10,000 a month in interest, which would equal $120K a year. And the thing with that is that if I look at the $3 million worth of debt at $120,000 a year worth of interest, I didn't have to go to the bank and ask for anything here. I only put down $800,000 on that, so it's like a 20% deposit anyway. So if you put down a 20% deposit, that's where it's at. $120,000 is like a 3% interest rate, much cheaper than what the bank's going to charge us anyway. And then every year I pay a $600,000 payment. Every year, I think it's in February that I paid that off, and every year I came back to the person and there's their money. So then those properties became outright after 5 years. It was like getting a 5-year loan, but you're not having to go to the bank and ask, hey, can I please get a loan? Can I get this? They don't do credit checks, anything like that. So technically, I've made the people my bank. Now, these come with massive risks attached to them. The volatility of the people. Vendor finance I really like because you're taking possession of it and you give them a first mortgage over the property. The problem is that these people, if you miss one day of a payment, or if like you're stacking 600 grand on this day, 50K on that day every month, that's 5 years that you have to sit there and pay them 50 grand on that specific day every month. And if something goes wrong, then you completely be fucked and they try and sue you, right? And I've had that happen. And, if you get too excited from doing these things and you start starving your cash flow, I've had it at points where it's costed me like $300,000-400,000 a month in repayments to get on things. So they're creative deals that are a bit crazy and a bit out there, but there's still ways to operate when the bank says no. And then the last one is the one that I've talked about a fair bit recently. And if you're stuck and you can't move forward, let's say that you've got a property that you bought for, I've done videos in this if you want to go, and this is called a security swap, but I'll throw it here again. Let's say you've got a property for, I don't know, $500,000. And then you've got a $400,000 loan on the property. Your property goes up to $1 million in value. You go and sell the property for $1 million. You think that you've got $600,000 there in profit, which you do. You've got that sitting in cash. But if you want to go buy more properties, you're thinking, okay, I could only spend $600,000 to go buy a new property. But no, if you structure it right and you get the right advice around this, it's very, very tricky, very complex. I've never seen a mortgage broker talk about security swap. I've never seen any property advisors talking about security swaps, and I've never seen many people talking about it anywhere on the internet actually for this instance. But you could keep that $400,000 and you put that into like a term deposit and you can keep it home for a bit longer, or you just straight up do the security swap to the deal. You keep that 400 grand. You then go and buy 2 more properties at $200,000 each, or 250 grand a piece. Let's just call it 250 and 250. You can attach those properties to the same old loan. And instead of you walking away going, I've got a 500 grand property I bought, I sold it for $1 million, I had a 400 grand debt, I've got 600 grand in my pocket, what can I do now? You can walk out of it and say, okay, we'll keep the 400 grand loan open, purchase 2 more properties, attach it to that old loan, as well as keeping, you'd need to take the deposit out of that. So you'd put 100 grand over here as deposit. So you'd have 500 grand cash as net. You'd keep the 400 grand loan with 2 new properties at 250 grand a piece, and you end up with 500 grand cash out in your pocket and 500 grand worth of property still attached to that old debt that you had. That's called a security swap. So there's 5 different ways on how you can operate if the bank says no to you, and you can still purchase, acquire, and make moves whilst that time frame. If you want help on building out a strategy, I'm going to do a disclaimer on this one. This is not financial advice. This is not structuring advice. This is not legal advice. This is not taxation advice. There is massive risks that occur from doing these types of things. They are not novice 101, beginner 101 sort of stuff. They're for highly sophisticated individuals to, at different stages in their portfolio. But they're definitely things that are available out there. Stuff like delayed settlements, normal options, relatively normal, but you want to have a clear path of how you're going to exit out of that deal or make that settle at the time. Don't just go throwing them out because you'll lose your deposit. Touch wood, I've never lost a deposit from doing that, which is fantastic. You want to make sure your cash flow is right. You want to make sure that, do you have a business? Where's your cash flow coming from? Is it coming from other assets in your portfolio? Are you working on a stage sell out of your portfolio, entering into retirement age? There's many factors to incorporate into working out, is this the best thing for you and what's best for you? So if you do want help, here at B.Invested, got the team, we can help you. We specialize in this sort of stuff. Other people aren't doing these sorts of things. Hit us up 1300 367 925, admin at beinvested.com.au. Thanks a lot for watching. And if you like these videos and you like the podcast, share, subscribe. Every Thursday, new one will come out. Hopefully, for those that are just listening to this on Spotify and Google Play and Apple Play, you got the picture from this, not just watching for a whiteboard. Thanks, guys. Bye for now. Have a great day.
Like Bilal said, man, we're stuck in the matrix. This my advice, don't care if you take it.